And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Sunday morning showing several areas of IFR up here on the central Arctic coast, along the central Brooks Range, another zone there over the Seward Peninsula, and along the Yukon Delta coast here to the north shore of Nunivak Island. Marginal VFR, southern Bering Sea, and all of the Aleutians, with IFR here for the North Gulf Coast, and another batch of that storm coming northward here, spreading into Kodiak Island. And for the afternoon, that makes a pretty good jog to the north with IFR all the way up into Prince William Sound, east side of the Kenai Peninsula. Also increasing along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Solid IFR extending down to Kodiak. IFR now right over Nunivak Island down to the north shore of the Alaska Peninsula as well as Unalaska Island. And IFR up here for the North Slope and eastern Arctic coast with pretty good VFR conditions for the Panhandle and not bad out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And then for Monday morning, IFR here right off the west coast there from about St. Lawrence Island across Macoriac down to the Alaska Peninsula. Some more IFR up there for the North Slope to the western Arctic coast there a little bit. Good VFR though in the interior all the way down into northern Bristol Bay. And IFR here for the North Gulf Coast and along the coast of the Panhandle, marginal VFR over the inside waters with this IFR down across Kodiak Island and some marginal VFR for Cook Inlet up to the western Alaska Range. And for the afternoon becomes VFR for Cook Inlet here all the way down in toward the Barren Islands, northward through the Susitna Valley. The interior looking really good Monday afternoon, just some leftover IFR up here over the western, southwestern North Slope, and still a band of IFR off the southwest coast there, but Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, looking good, VFR flying there, and for the North Gulf Coast, a narrow band of IFR here, mostly over the Coast Range and down along the southern Seward Peninsula there, with marginal VFR for the southeast coast. Areas of VFR for the Aleutians and Bering Sea with areas of marginal VFR as well. For the passes, Anatuvik calling it IFR, maybe a little better for Adigan, marginal VFR there. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, especially on those eastern entrances. Same forecast for Rainy as well. And for Windy, marginal VFR, so a little better there. Central Alaska Range. Moving east though, Isabel IFR and Mentasta VFR. For Tanita, marginal VFR trending toward IFR later in the day. And Portage, IFR, Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels 2,000 feet here across southern Alaska. And then 4,000 feet there, well, just south of Kodiak Island. And from there, looking at icing, we've got icing isolated or considerable moderate rime icing here for the Gulf of Alaska in over the Panhandle, coming up into the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, extending back in toward Bristol Bay. And then from there, looking at the jet stream, good south to north flow here with that active system, even at 33,000 feet there with that center just south of the Alaska Peninsula. Winds up to 105 knots and turning southwest 65 knots there, southern Prince William Sound. And out to the west, we've got northerlies at 100 knots here across the west central Aleutians. And for the 9,000 foot winds, broad area of northerly flow across the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, 35 to 40 knots, east-southeast 40 to 55 knots here across southern Alaska with that big low there south of the Alaska Peninsula. South winds here over the southern Gulf at about 50 to 60 knots. And for 3,000 feet here, ahead of that strong front, we've got east-southeast winds, 65 to 75 knots there into the Gulf of Alaska. Winds on the increase here for the southeast coast, much lighter in the interior. And those easterlies continue, the polar easterlies continue to blow up along the Arctic coast at 30 to 45 knots, and as it has been, the strongest winds on the western coast. Otherwise, northerlies 30 to 45 knots across the central, eastern Aleutians, and southeast Bering Sea. And turbulence, pretty widespread, considerable moderate turbulence here, Alaska Peninsula out to about Atka, covering all of southern Alaska here and the Panhandle, about surface to as high as 8,000 feet. Much lighter over the interior, and then with those continued easterly winds, could see some isolated moderate turbulence for the western Arctic coast and a lesser chance there on the east side.